Welcome to the I'll Try That podcast, where three friends talk about beer.
I was thinking about this last night in bed.
Smashed it. Brew for success.
As a soon-to-be fur daddy, another one in the bag. I'm vetoing that. In this week's episode, we're travelling to the West Midlands in the UK to talk about Banks's Amber Bitter. But first, the hot topic.
So, for this hot topic, I wanted to give you some facts on beer that this website has told me is interesting. Now, I would like to hear your views on whether these are interesting or not.
Okay, love a good fact. I mean, it follows on. We have a Fact Monday every week on Twitter and Instagram. So let's see if some of those will make it into our posts.
Hopefully they're more interesting than Joe's facts that he normally gives out.
Oh, wow.
That's a weird burn. I usually give pretty good facts, I'll have you know.
So, the first fact I've got you is the Czech Republic was the first country to have a beer museum. Now, is that interesting or not?
I want to give that on a scale of 1 to 5. I'm giving that a 2 of interesting.
I'm going to give it a 1. Yeah, 1. It's not... nah.
Okay. China is the world's biggest beer producer with over 47 million kilolitres per year.
It's very interesting, but I already knew it. So does that help?
Yeah, I'm going to give that a 3.
Okay, Joe?
I give that a 5. I think that's a very interesting fact. I think a lot of people would assume that it's the States, but if you're thinking by volume, then absolutely it has to be China because of the amount of people.
Another fact, McDonald's sells beers on its menu in many countries such as France, Germany, Portugal and South Korea.
Oh, that's mildly interesting. I'll give that a 4.
Yeah. Have you never had a beer in a French McDonald's?
No. Have you, Drobwell?
Yeah, of course I have. I'm a cultured individual. I've travelled the world. I've seen many things. I've had a beer with my fish fillet.
Okay, that ramps us up to a 6 for me. That makes it a 6 on the interesting scale.
Okay. The oldest beer brewery, I've probably said that word wrong again, dates back to 1040.
Okay, I'd put that as a 5. I think that's high on the interesting scale.
Now, Joe, I feel like this is a fact that you will no doubt say I already knew. But around the world, humans consume over 50 billion gallons of beer every year.
No, that is a new fact on me. I could put that on the 4 scale of interesting.
Oh, okay.
You can stick it in your fact pack and you can pull it out at a later date.
That's kind of a fact that you might pull out on a dinner party with friends that you know, but maybe you're the spouse of who. No, I don't know. I feel like that's a new friend's interesting fact. It's not offensive, but it's interesting enough that not many people will know that.
But I also wouldn't bring it up on a first date.
Yeah, it's definitely not a first date fact. I agree with you on that one.
Okay, so for the final one I'll give you today. The oldest archaeological evidence of fermentation is 13,000 years old.
I give that a 1.
Yeah, it's not blown me away.
I'll tell you for why. It's interesting, but only in the sense that if you don't know what fermentation is. Like, fermentation is just basically you leave stuff out and it starts fermenting.
It's like Greek
so,
yogurt.
It's like you don't need anything to really start. Like, you can't drink or do anything with that kind of fermentation, but fermentation just happens naturally. So I give that on a 1 out of scale.
So Joe gave it a fart noise out of
You've really ended this segment poorly, and I didn't see a high at any point.
Okay, to be fair, I never said it was going to end in a high. So, if anything, I know, it's like a weird movie where you're like, the ending's not as good as I thought it was going to be.
I felt like we could have just left that on the fart noise.
Yeah. if you guys don't mind, Pursuit of Hoppy this time.
So, guys, this week we're going back to our roots, our hometown area of the West Midlands. And I do say hometown area because Wolverhampton and Worcester are probably only about an hour drive away from each other. So that's quite close, relatively close. But the biggest brewery in that area is Banks's. And Banks's has been a part of the whole West Midlands area for forever. It feels like they've always been an integral part of the beer culture there. But actually, there's some interesting kind of like developments that's happened with the Banks's brand, hasn't there, Simmo?
Yeah, so it started way back in 1875, where a Park Brewery in Wolverhampton. So it's lowly positioned then, and then within 15 years, it linked with 3 other companies. So the Banks and Brewery Co. Dudley Breweries with Fox Brewery, and also the Wolverhampton Dudley Brewery, all combined to keep making Banks bitter. So it's had a lot of progression within the 15 years it's first started. And then you can keep going on, and it kept progressing. And then a big change happened in 1999. So again, I mean, we're getting very much closer into where we are now, where they joined the Mansfield Brewing Company, as well as Marston's, Thompson and Evershed, to create a conglomerate of breweries. And I think what happened in 2007, Joe? Is that right? 2007?
Yeah, so actually Marston as a name is only been around since 2007. Before that point, it was a rebrand of the Wolverhampton and Dudley Breweries PLC, which happened in 2007, which I didn't quite know. I always just knew of Marston's as being this, long-standing, been around quite a long time here in the UK. But actually it's a rebrand of this Wolverhampton and Dudley Brewery. And obviously, as we know, most recently was hitting the headlines with Marston's is this is kind of joint venture, kind of collaboration, or I guess kind of takeover of Carlsberg with Marston's to become part of the Carlsberg UK group. So
essentially, Banks is a big part of like this Marston's superpower. That, well, as I say, Marston's is a very big company, and Banks is part of that development because it was part of the company, even though it wasn't named that all the way through it.
I mean, it's definitely, Banks has been around for a very long time. I don't know how much, it's been around for a long time, but whether or not it could be classed as a superpower in that if it's been one of the best-selling beers in the UK, I don't think that's true, but it's certainly been popularised around the UK.
It feels like another, I suppose not relatively small brewer, but it feels like a smallish brewer in comparison to Carlsberg and stuff like that. It's just been brought out again, been taken over, and hopefully, I think this time for the better.
I think so. I mean, it gives it a new lease of life, doesn't it, when it gets a new injection of cash, and it gives it the kind of stability of a larger organisation. And let's face it, Banks has been around for a long time. It's very warm in our hearts for, the kind of the local area. A regional beer, I suppose, is probably what I'd refer to Banks's. But it's not popular in that sense. Like, I would never really be going like, I just have to have a Banks now. It's popular with a certain age bracket, I would say, in a certain group who have grown up with it. And, I think their recent redesign in 2016 has kind of shed a bit of light on that Banks is trying to remain relevant for younger audiences, but whilst trying not to polarize their core drinking base.
So what are your thoughts on this redesign?
Oh, well, with the redesign, I think the bottle and the design on the bottle is fantastic. I think the white with the blue line coming over the top, I think it looks really smart. It looks clean. It looks acceptable. It goes along the line with a lot of the new modern brewers that are coming out with your Punk IPAs, your Camdens, are all really, really doing well and looking good. And that's what they're trying to enter and become, which I think they're doing is fantastic.
I completely agree with that. I think how they've managed to look and detail what they're calling the hierarchy. So these are the different elements of they're saying on the pack. They've taken a clean, fresh look at that. You see the line first. You see this red band with Banks written inside it. But they've really dialed up the fact that it's an amber bitter. Now, I know Banks is bitter. I don't know Banks is amber bitter. So I'm interested into why they've decided that they've decreased the literal size of bitter on the pack.
I mean, for me, I think they're trying to get away maybe from that attitude that it is bitter to drink and bitter taste in a way, because I don't think it is. I mean, personally, with when I drink it and like the taste of it, I really enjoy it. It's very subtle. It does feel quite smooth, and I think it is what you'd call a quintessential session drink.
No, I was going to say, I just think amber comes across as a much more approachable term. Like, bitter has so many much more negative connotations to it. Like, bitter, if you were to bite into a lemon, bitter, very dark chocolate and stuff like that. Amber is a lot more relaxing, inviting and stuff like that. And I think, as we said, they're trying to rebrand themselves. They're trying to become more of an interesting something for maybe the younger generations, or just more accessible. Because looking at their old logo, it is very traditional along the lines of old beer companies. You can tell it looks like you go into an old boys pub, you'd see Banks Bitter on the draft sort of thing, and you recognise those labels sort of thing. But I think they're going along that normally when you look at all the craft different beers and ales, you are drawn to these funky designs, these pleasant designs sort of thing. And I think that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they've done a really nice link of they've drawn inspiration from their heartland of, Wolverhampton, the West Midlands, which is obviously very important for the Banks's bitter or the Banks's amber bitter now drinker. If this is your drink, like, you want to not feel like you're being, your brewery is saying, I don't care about you anymore. I just want to get over after these new drinkers. So they have to have that kind of there's always going to be that tension within a redesign, within a heritage product, because you need to capture and bring along your core consumers, but also make it appealing that new drinkers might pick you up and think of you in a different way. But I'm interested, actually, because we've said how much we quite like this redesign on the bottle labels and the cans, and how it's been graphically done. But the website, we have to talk about the website.
I was on there earlier, and I think it's a huge swing and a massive miss. I think it's awfully designed. It doesn't look accessible. They've gone for some graffiti sort of effect on their walls, trying to make them come across as edgy, but it looks like they've just gone through clip art from the 90s and just pulled some stuff up onto Microsoft and just stuck it on there. And I don't know if you guys noticed as well, they've gone down, I think they're marketing it wrong with some of their wording that they're putting across.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed was, for instance, their brewery tours. So the fact that you can go and check out the tours and you can go look at their ales, they've called the main thing Lads on Tour. And I think for me, that's so old. It's kind of like that. We've gone past that kind of era where it's like lads, lads, lads. And I feel like they're holding on to something potentially that's not there.
But it's not old in the sense that it's heritage, and that's what something you might say back in the 1800s or something. But it's old in that it feels dated in that kind of terminology and language of saying lads on tour, let's go with the lads. Like, it's just, it's a joke, but they're not making it a joke. They're trying to, that's actually like part of their kind of tone of voice, part of their brand. So yeah, it's very off.
Especially for a beverage that I think is it's only 3.8%. It is quite smooth. It has a lot of people enjoy this, not because it's crazy interesting, but because you can enjoy it. You can sit and it's a relaxing drink. So I was very surprised when I was on the website and I saw Lads on Tour. I was like, it feels out of place.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think going back to the liquid, I mean, it is definitely through and through a bitter for me. It has that kind of like bitterness taste, but not in a overtly bitter. But it has that, as we know with the maturation process, it's keeping the hops in for longer. So it definitely has that kind of intrinsic like bitterness to it, but it's not as smooth as like a John Smith's. I know that John Smith have gone all out to be the smoothest bitter in the world, and I think in their way of doing things, but it's a traditional drink. A bitter is only a traditional English drink. You don't really get bitters anywhere else in the world. And so it's hard. I think they're in this kind of weird tension almost of they have a product which appeals to a very historic, heritage English drinking consumer, but they're trying to be relevant for the modern world. I mean, we're all of the same age, so we're of the same kind of view of like we've grown up and this is where we've introduced it. But I'm interested to know how maybe another generation is. I mean, hang on, let me just give my dad a call. Hope he picks up.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, Dad. How we doing?
How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Now, I will let you know, we're on the pod right now. I wanted to get your thoughts on, we're talking Banks's bitter, and wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Obviously, you're pretty familiar with
well,
the Midlands, right?
Yeah, well, it was the first Midlands beer I got to taste when we moved here about 40 years ago.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Mum and I, we bought a small house in Lansdowne Street, and the pub opposite us, the Lansdowne Inn, was a Banks's pub. And I hadn't tried it before, but I got on really well with it, actually. And what made it even better was that the landlord would let me buy a pint, and if I didn't feel like staying in the pub, I could bring it home with me and just enjoy it in front of the telly with your mum. Take the pint glass back the next day.
Oh gosh, I wish they did that still. That sounds awesome. There was a lot more trust back then, I guess, with the glassware and pint glasses.
You knew where to find me. I was literally opposite the pub.
Oh, that's amazing. So you're pretty familiar with just Banks's in general from like from 40 years ago onwards. So what's your kind of overall take on Banks's then?
Well, I've always liked it, but to be honest, Joe, it's not a beer I've really tried over the years on a regular basis, because I found just other beers that I think are a little bit more flavoursome.
Right.
I did actually take Mike and Dave out to the Oak Apple on Monday night, and we got Banks's served to us there. So it felt it was a good idea to just have a bit of a chat with them about what they thought, and that was quite interesting, actually. Well, can I tell you a little story first of all? Dave had been living in Bristol,
right,
and he was used to like me. I was brought up in Bristol. Both of us were used to Courage Best, directors at a push. But when he came up to live in Worcester, he didn't like the look of it because it had a head on it, and he wasn't used to that. So he took an instant dislike to it. But actually, he mellowed. He quite liked the pint he had on Monday night. Having said which, he had just had a bottle of Desperado, that tequila flavour.
So he'd got himself in the mood for to retry Banks's again. So was that the first time he'd had Banks's in all those years?
I think it was, actually, yeah.
And so he was just solely put off from the head that he had.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
First impressions, yeah. Amazing, isn't it?
It was so good.
Anyway, we were comparing notes, and we kind of felt it wasn't a really special beer, but we could see why it was sort of got a reputation for being a bit of a session beer, because it's just easy, pleasant drinking.
Right.
It's not a challenge, and you can just sit there and have a good chat and sink a couple of pints. I don't drink much more than that anyway. I never have done, but absolutely fine for that.
And so what I know that they've done a bit of a redesign in the last, I think it was 2016. What are your kind of takes of the old what Banks's used to look like and what it looks like now?
Yeah, do you know, I was actually quite surprised, because I had to sort of look at a kind of an essential supermarket home product, or a basic product, and at that price, it must really shift. But no, I wasn't overly taken with the design, but I don't know what you guys feel about that.
Well, we've actually just been talking about it. It's interesting you say, because we were quite confused as to, they've been such a traditional brewer, and seen that they've been around for a long time, especially around the Midlands, but their whole new look and feel is very much trying to cater to a very contemporary, younger audience. And I wondered if that was quite, for someone like yourself who's known the beer for, a few decades now, if that was almost quite polarising and kind of off-putting to look at the beer now.
Well, no, I don't think it put me off. I was just a bit surprised. I like the old design, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's a bit more colourful. But no, that's okay. I've been trying different beers, and I know that they're just such a huge variety now, and the can design is clearly very important. The branding, clearly they feel appeals to particular audiences. But I thought they were trying to modernise it. If that's what they were trying to do, give it a fresh look, then fine. Whether the beer itself is going to hit the mark with a newer, younger audience, I don't know, but it's got to, hasn't it? Because people don't last forever. So if you don't move and re-engage a younger audience, you're just not going to succeed unless you change the flavour.
Yeah.
So what Yeah, I'd be interested to know what you guys felt of the flavour.
Yeah, it's good. It's smooth. This isn't the first time I've had a Banks's. Obviously, we were just talking about it. It's never been a staple, of Banks's for us, but we've definitely tried it before. So I know that kind of distinctive, taste. It is a bitter after all, but with this whole redesign and how they're thinking about the hierarchy and what they want to communicate about the beer, they've really downplayed the bitter of the beer and really dialed up how it's an amber. Beer, and I think that's really interesting because obviously that's they're trying to speak to, as you said, like kind of a younger audience or hit up these kind of more beer cues that we're thinking of nowadays of what they're prioritizing and what they want to know is the fact that it's kind of this amber beer rather than the fact that it's a bitter. Like bitter's almost irrelevant to a lot of sense. I mean, I know like a John Smith's is is the most famous bitter that I can think of, and that's absolutely tanking right now in popularity, and they've got so much awareness. I was looking at a study about it yesterday actually. They've got so much awareness in the UK, but they just don't have anyone buying it because it just does not appeal to younger audiences. So I think this is Banks's way of saying we've been around for a while, we've still got a good product that still, means something and it's very, people will still get on with it, but they just need to change how it looks and how people perceive it so that they'll actually try it.
No, well, fair play to them. You've got to give it a go, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I get that. But no, I was surprised because I was looking for something that said Banks is bitter, and I couldn't find it. It was like you say, it's all Banks is amber ale. So and it's not a really bitter beer. It's quite a smooth. It's not a sort of it hasn't got a real kick to it. There's no sort of. Some of the beers you get now are quite zesty, sort of citrusy, aren't they? Or,
yeah.
I didn't find that at all. Obviously, not trying to compete with those more contemporary beers, but in terms of rebranding, no, I wish them luck because I think it's it's been a good staple servant of the Midlands, and those who live a bit further afield who've enjoyed it as well. It'd be nice to feel that it's going to survive.
That's awesome. It's good. It's kind of mirroring on what we were saying on our end, and it's good to know that it's across generations. It's seen as a positive move what they've done. All right, Dad. Well, thanks so much for taking the call and give us your thoughts on that. That was awesome. All right. Well, I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Cheers, Joe.
Bye, Dad.
Bye.
Bye.
I really enjoyed that. That was that was spot on and really nice to see it from another angle because I've never really drunk Banks Bitter up until doing this. Maybe ever so often when you find it in the back of your parents' cupboard or something like that, which someone had left over from a party. But that was really nice to hear.
For me, it sounds like your dad has said that his friends have started trying it when they haven't tried it before. So it was almost like a new experience for them, and it's almost like a new experience for us. So it's interesting how something so old is now coming back to the forefront. And I think I really like that it's almost as if a bitter, which is such a traditional drink, is now getting almost popularized by it.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about you're trying to capture new drinkers, people always assume that means younger drinkers. That means people who are, millennials or Gen Zers. But actually, it could be just new drinkers who don't had your beer in a long time. So I think that just kind of shows that this redesign and how they're trying to be more contemporary is appealing to all the generations now. Like a wider subset of drinkers.
And for me, as your dad said, the fact that it is so cheap means it's always worth a punt. I mean, I feel now ripped off. I mean, I got it for 95p, not 89. So,
I got it for 80p.
I mean, that's just crazy. That is absolutely absurd. Like, for me, there's no reason why you shouldn't try it. It's just...
Unless you're massively offended by bitters, then yes, I grant you. Don't pick this up. This is through and through a bitter. It's a relatively smooth bitter and an unoffensively tasting bitter, but it is a bitter nonetheless. So if you're, you want something that's a bit sweeter, you like your, kind of hoppy, IPAs styled, zesty things, then this is definitely not the beer for you. But, on Instagram, Banks Bitter have 1,801 followers.
Okay.
And on Twitter, they have 3,130. Now, I would say they need to up their Twitter game and their Instagram game. I mean, they've got posts here where the bottle's hardly in the shot. They're doing, this is a post from November the 5th, so Guy Fawkes night here in the UK, we celebrate blowing up things. And,
That's okay. Well, Jesus Christ.
Well, it is. That's what we do. It's our 4th of July. Yay, fireworks. Boom. Let's go. So, and the post is whatever you're toasting, make sure it's with a Banks's. Cheers. And they've got marshmallows roasting over a fire. And then someone like a cropped hand with a Banks bitter, but you can hardly see it's a Banks's at all. They've got one from Halloween as well, where it's like a pumpkin, and then they're kind of pulling out for it. It just seems like there are people doing this. I don't know. They need to up their game on social media.
I would really like to see that the board meetings to do with all of their advertising. I can't imagine they're great, and I can't imagine they're that inspiring.
What, you think that because of the people in the brewery who are doing it? Well, no, but then they're probably going to be getting outside help. They're probably going to be getting an agency who's, local in the Wolverhampton area. I don't know, in Birmingham. There's quite a few great agencies in the Birmingham area who are probably saying, yeah, we can do this for you. We'll help you. I mean, their website screams a younger agency who've come in and just kind of ripped out, said, yeah, you want to be contemporary? You want to be new? You want to speak to the youth? Well, let's give you this graffiti, grungy, like...
Brick wall!
It's just so off point. Like, you need to have a rethink about that, Banks's. I'm sorry.
I mean, for me, I do think that it would be a massive shame if a company like Banks Bitter fell apart because they didn't push themselves enough. Because they are so old. They're from 1875. They've been going a long time. I would hate for it to die out because they've been putting brick walls on their websites.
I don't think that's going to be what's going to do it. I honestly think, as we've been saying, just as a very small cross-section of people we've had a discussion with, ourselves included, and, my dad and his friends, the fact that it is, people are coming back to Banks's. This might not be, the numbers. I haven't got the full data of the UK, but, they've got to be seeing some sort of uptick from this redesign in 2016, because I've taken more notice of Banks's. I'd be interested in picking it up again, where I definitely wouldn't have done before. And that's all we have time for this week's episode of the I'll Try That podcast. And so from me, Joe,
Rich,
and Simmo,
goodbye. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram,
Twitter,
and watch us on YouTube.
Goodbye now. Always drink responsibly, and if you or anyone else needs some help, go to drinkaware.co.uk for more information.